Good morning and welcome to Law Talks here on 4CRB. A confronting story in the news recently highlighted a growing issue affecting families across Australia. Older people ending up stuck in hospital not because they need medical treatment, but because there's simply nowhere else for them to go after their health has taken a turn. One case recently published involved an 84-year-old woman with dementia who had been left in hospital for months, unable to return home, but also unable to secure a place in aged care. And sadly, she's not alone. Experts say this is happening to hundreds of Australians at any given time, with hospitals now caring for people who really need long-term support elsewhere. So today we're going to dive into what's behind this growing crisis, what happens when someone can't go home after a hospital stay, and importantly, what families can do to plan ahead and avoid finding themselves in this situation. And we're joined today by Attwood Marshall Lawyers, accredited aged care professional and partner Debbie Sage. Good morning, Debbie.
Good morning, Robin.
Debbie, how common is this situation where someone is essentially stuck in hospital because there's no aged care placement available?
Yeah, unfortunately, it is becoming increasingly common. Hospitals are seeing more older patients who are medically ready to leave, but they can't safely go home because they don't have the right support in place. Sometimes they can't go home because their needs are too high and the only option is for them to go into care, but there's no residential aged care bed available in that area at that time. In other cases, the issue is not just about finding a bed, it's about delays around assessment, paperwork, finances, decision-making, and then finding a facility that meets the person's needs. So it's not a rare or unusual problem, I'm sorry to say. It is something that many families are confronting at the moment.
So can you walk us through what typically happens when an older person is admitted to hospital and it becomes clear they can't safely return home?
Yeah, usually the treating team starts the discharge planning quite early. And if it becomes clear that the person can't safely return home, the hospital usually involve a social worker, a discharge planner, and an aged care assessment process. The family may then need to consider what the next steps look like. So, for example, support at home, transitioning to care, putting them in respite, or just putting them permanently into residential aged care. But then at the same time, practical questions start to come through. So does the person still have capacity to make their decision about this? Is there an enduring power of attorney? Who should be signing the documents? What can they afford? And where is an appropriate placement available for you? This is often where the process becomes difficult and slow.
Yeah, so Debbie, where is the bottleneck happening? Why are so many people unable to move from hospital into appropriate aged care?
So there's not usually just one bottleneck. It's often several problems happening all at once. So the common issues that I see are limited availability in suitable aged care places, long waiting times for assessments or approvals, complex care needs such as dementia or challenging behaviours that need to be considered for placement, difficulty in just finding a provider that's willing or able to take that person, delays in just finding out that person's financial information. And then there's even more delays when there's no one who has the legal authority to make decisions on that person's behalf. So even when everyone agrees on the safest plan, putting that plan into place, whether that means moving them to a facility or setting up those proper supports at home, can still take up a lot of time.
Yeah, I can see why. So from what you see, what impact does being stuck in a hospital environment have on someone who really needs aged care support?
Oh, it can have such a serious impact. Hospitals are designed for acute medical treatment, not long-term living.
Yeah.
So for an older person, especially if they've got dementia or they're frail or confused, a prolonged hospital stay can lead to distress, disorientation, the reduced mobility, that's a big one, poor sleep, and then just loss of confidence. They may become socially isolated and decline simply because the environment they're in is not set up for normal daily living.
Yeah.
So even if they're medically stable, remaining in hospital for weeks or even months is often far from ideal.
And what about families? What kind of pressure does this situation place on them when they're trying to navigate this system?
Oh, the pressure on families can be enormous. They're often trying to absorb medical information, they're trying to make care decisions, they're dealing with paperwork, they're searching for placement and providers, they're trying to manage finances and then cope with the grief at the same time of such a big change. If siblings are involved, there can also be disagreements about what's best or who should be taking responsibility. Many families feel like they're being forced to make major decisions really quickly in a
Yeah.
system that they don't understand, while also worrying about their loved one that's sitting in a hospital bed with nowhere appropriate to go.
Debbie, if someone is in this situation right now, a loved one is stuck in hospital, where should they go for help?
The first point of contact is usually the hospital social worker or the discharge planner. This is
Okay.
usually where we get involved as well. We get a lot of referrals from hospitals on this. So families should speak directly to the treating team so that they understand the person's medical status, what level of care is going to be needed, what options are even being explored. Because if aged care services are needed, they should make sure that the assessment pathway has started and they should be actively engaging with My Aged Care and any relevant providers. And then, they should also be checking those practical legal issues that I mentioned earlier. Is there a power of attorney, an enduring power of attorney? Who is authorised to make decisions? Are there any identification and financial documents that are available that's going to help? Is there a current will? And any other key paperwork if longer decisions need to be made, such as an advanced health directive or statement of choices. Because very often delays happen because families focus on the placement search,
Yeah.
but they don't realise that there's a lot of decision making and document issues that are slowing down the process.
And this is the part many people don't think about early enough. What steps can people take now to reduce the risk of ending up in this situation?
So the biggest step is planning early before a crisis happens. So that means having honest conversations about future care preferences, making sure that there's an enduring power of attorney in place, making sure other key documents can be found and located, such as an advanced health directive, understanding what the assets and income are to assist with this next process, discussing whether the home is still safe and realistic if your health declines. It's also important to think ahead about aged care options before they're urgently needed. Families who have already explored home care, respite, residential care, they tend to make better decisions than families who are doing everything for the first time in a hospital corridor.
Mm.
Early planning does not remove every problem, but it gives families a much better chance of avoiding panic decisions when health suddenly changes. The hardest part about this issue is that it usually becomes urgent before families realise how many moving parts there are. The earlier the planning happens, the better the chances of avoiding a situation where someone's well enough to leave hospital but has nowhere to go.
Yeah, it is a sad situation. And Debbie, as we say time and time again on this program, the best protection is planning early, especially around decision-making documents and future care options. So thank you for your insights and advice again today.
Thank you so much.
You've been listening to Law Talks here on 4CRB, which you can hear every Friday morning from 9 o'clock.